Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a huge storm that is coming to the United States later this week, and this storm is going to cause a lot of problems. This includes the threat of severe weather, including damaging winds, large hail, and even a few tornadoes. We'll also be watching for a large cold blast to impact the country as we go into this weekend, which this cold blast will bring the return of winter for some areas. I'll be giving you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening right now in the United States today, and we'll begin with the entire country, which is honestly pretty quiet right now. This is the infrared imagery, gives you an idea of the cloud cover and as well as any features that we have in terms of thunderstorms. We don't really have much of that right now. It's actually beautiful anywhere from the northeast all the way back through areas in the Great Plains. You can barely pick out any cloud cover. The only cloud cover right now is back down near the Gulf Coast, which that's really meaningless at this point. Even back in the northern and central plains, it's really quiet right now, which is not something we see very often, especially closer to mid-March. But I do want to mention that is going to change as we get closer to Wednesday, as there will be a large storm coming out of the Pacific Ocean that's going to move over the Rocky Mountains, and that'll eventually allow for a large severe weather event to take place as we go into late Wednesday, Thursday, and perhaps even Friday here across much of the lower 48. So it's definitely going to get pretty interesting. But for now, enjoy the beautiful weather across the country. Most areas have very nice weather, at least today and tomorrow, but obviously things will change as we go into Wednesday. And by the way, back up in New England, lots of snow fell across many areas in northern New England over the past 48 hours. That low pressure system is now moving off to the east. There will still be a few snow showers throughout the afternoon today, but most of that will be clearing out as we go into this evening and eventually into Tuesday. All right, let's talk more about the weather pattern that'll be impacting the United States over the next 7 days. And to look at that, we are going to look at the jet stream. The jet stream gives us an idea of the weather patterns that are happening across the United States. And we're going to begin with tonight. There's really not a whole lot happening right now. We have a very inactive jet stream. For the most part, we have two different jet streams. We have our polar jet stream and then our subtropical jet stream, neither of which are really doing anything here across the country. We're actually really in a dry pattern right now. A lot of convergence on the backside of that low pressure system, keeping many areas at this point in a nicer state of mind when it comes to weather. But once we go closer to Wednesday, things are going to change because we're going to have a large storm that is going to come out of the Pacific Ocean, and that's going to develop very quickly back over near the Rocky Mountains. And this low pressure system in particular is the one that is going to bring the threat of severe weather as we go into Wednesday and as well as Thursday. And really what we need to watch for with the jet stream is exactly how strong these upper level winds are across areas in the central plains and even back through the Midwest and as well as back in the southern plains, because this can play a factor into the overall severe weather potential here in these areas. But once we go into late Thursday and Friday, that low pressure system is actually going to backtrack to the southwest, something we don't see very often even in the upper levels. And what that's going to actually allow for is a different weather pattern as we go into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. What I mean by that is that we're gonna have a low pressure system coming out of Canada, and this is coming out of Canada. Keep that in mind. And usually when we have low pressure systems that come out of Canada, they bring a lot of colder weather, and that is what this low pressure system is going to do as we go into Saturday into Sunday. We are actually going to get a late winter cold blast across areas in the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and eventually into the north and east. And we actually could see this dive all the way into the southern plains and the southeast. It's going to cover a very large chunk of areas that are east of the Rocky Mountains. Once we go into early next week, things become a bit more uncertain, but that dive with this low pressure system will allow for a lot of colder air across much of the United States. So just be prepared for that. We'll be talking about how cold it'll actually get here in just a couple of minutes, but that is something that's going to be a big change as we go into early next week. Before that cold blast happens, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to severe weather, because we're going to have a multi-day severe weather event here across the country. And beginning with tossing trampolines on Tacos Tuesday, we do have a marginal threat of severe weather, which does include areas like western Missouri, south and eastern parts of Kansas, and as well as northeast Oklahoma. Obviously, this is a marginal threat of severe weather, so it's a 1 out of 5 on the severe weather scale. It's a very low threat. Main concern, at least for tomorrow, will be some isolated damaging winds and large hail, but that threat will gradually expand as we go into Wednesday, which is Wacky Weather Wednesday. We do currently have a marginal threat of severe weather from southern Iowa back into northeast parts of North Texas. Now, the main concern as we go into Wednesday will be damaging winds and large hail. It's a little bit more of a conditional risk overall. There might also be an isolated brief tornado, so we'll have to watch that potential closely. But overall, it's a low threat at this time, and again, another marginal threat of severe weather. It does expand a lot more, though, as we go into Thursday. I do fully expect that this risk of severe weather will grow in terms of how large it is. And what I mean by that is I do think that there will be some sort of risk of severe weather back near the Midwest, and it might not be a slight risk, it might only be a marginal threat, but I do think there will be some level of severe weather there on Thursday night into maybe Friday morning. And then back down here, I do think the marginal threat of severe weather will be quite large. So just keep that in mind. But for the time being, the Storm Prediction Center has a slight risk of severe weather for areas in southeast Oklahoma, much of North Texas, northwest Louisiana, and western parts of Arkansas. As of now, all modes of severe weather are going to be in play, meaning damaging winds, large hail, and perhaps tornadoes will be possible as we go into Thursday. So make sure that you have multiple ways to receive alerts, have a tornado action plan in place just in case. Obviously, we are still several days out, so there will be some changes to the forecast. But make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. We'll be keeping you posted with the latest as the storm evolves. And I'm going to talk more about the severe weather potential more in detail as we go into Thursday, because this is going to be an interesting day overall. As we go into Thursday, the moisture content is going to be streaming out of the Gulf of Mexico. And why I mentioned that I think the risk of severe weather will grow as we go into Thursday is two different reasons. One of which the dew points will actually be in the mid to upper 50s in some areas across the Midwest. This will actually be the potential where we have our triple point access back over in parts of the northwest Missouri area, back into southwest Iowa. And this could allow for some severe weather near areas in the Midwest, primarily near and just south of the Chicago suburbs is where I would be watching for some level of severe weather as we go into late Thursday into Friday morning. A much more favorable environment, though, as of now, is going to be back down in that slight risk of severe weather where dew points will be well into the 60s. That's going to create a lot of buoyancy, leading to a more organized threat of severe weather. Once we go into Friday, this system starts to become a bit more disorganized, and we're not going to have really nearly as organized of a severe weather threat as we go into Friday or Saturday, but I do think there will be some level of severe weather. I just think overall there's not nearly as much confidence right now past Thursday night. Now, one other thing that we can look at is the instability. This gives us an idea of basically putting gasoline into a vehicle, but in this sense, it's the fuel for severe weather. And what we're going to have to watch for as we go into Thursday is this streaming area of instability across areas in the Central Plains, back into the Southern Plains, and even in parts of the Midwest, because there will be enough instability there for at least some low-end threat of severe weather across areas in the Midwest. But with that being said, we have plenty of instability back down in the Southern Plains and the lower Mississippi Valley as well for there to be a severe weather threat. Once we go into Friday, there will be enough instability even in the Ohio Valley for some sort of isolated threat of severe weather as well, and maybe a bit more of an organized threat of severe weather closer to the Gulf Coast. And that also includes Saturday and perhaps even into Sunday. There will be some instability down there right along the Gulf Coast for some sort of threat of severe weather. So that's why I'm mentioning overall that there will at least be some risk of severe weather even back in the Midwest, as long as we have enough moisture and as well as instability, and if the low-level winds do remain strong enough. That's another thing we have to watch for, but as of now, that is forecasted to stay at least at enough of a point where there would be some severe weather. Now let's go into the future radar and give you an idea of what that severe weather threat looks like by the middle of the week. Notice again, over the next couple of days, we're going to be relatively quiet across much of the country. Things change, though, as we go into Tuesday evening. A few isolated severe storms will be possible near Missouri. Overall, again, a very low-end risk of severe weather. I'm not expecting to go live for that, by the way. Once we go into late Wednesday night, a more conditional risk of severe weather will again develop across those same areas with this low pressure system. That's going to bring some isolated severe weather to areas like Missouri. By Thursday, a much more organized threat of severe weather will develop. We'll be watching two different areas, one of which will be in the Midwest, where I think overall, again, a pretty low-end risk of severe weather will exist. I'm not expecting a severe weather outbreak up there. Back down in the Southern Plains, that is where a much more organized threat of severe weather will attempt to develop Thursday afternoon, bringing all modes of severe weather as we go into Thursday afternoon and evening. Then a couple of severe storms possible back up in areas like Illinois, perhaps even back through Indiana as we go into Thursday night. Again, I'm expecting if there's any severe weather there, it's going to be a low threat, so maybe some isolated damaging winds or hail. Once we go into Friday, storms continue to push to the east. There will be some level of severe weather on Friday, but it's going to be a pretty isolated threat overall. By the time we go into Saturday, that low pressure system moves off to the east, and we'll be dealing with a little bit of snow back over in the upper Midwest as we go into Saturday and Sunday. And eventually, as we go into Monday, more storms across the Gulf Coast that'll lead to some severe weather. And there is even a chance for some snow as far south as the Chicago suburbs as we go into Monday. And that is all due to a cold blast that is coming to the United States as we go into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Notice this large cold air mass will usher in behind that low pressure system as we go into Sunday and Monday. This will cool down a lot of areas. And what that means for the temperatures by the time we get to next Monday, well, it's going to cool down quite a bit. This is Sunday morning. Notice temperatures into the 30s and 20s across the northern plains. Eventually by Monday morning, many areas will also be in the 30s and 20s. We could even see some below freezing temperatures as far south as Texas as we go into Monday of next week. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.